For joining us today. We are excited to kick off 2024 with our first episode of Carbon Experts Live. And before we get started, I'd love to invite our live audience to pop into the chat if you're joining us on Livestorm, or if you're joining us on LinkedIn, you can hop into the comments section and let us know where you are tuning in from. We have a global audience, and so we always love to see where people are joining us from. So go ahead and put that in the chat. And to introduce our guest today, we are joined by Sana Mahmood, E2 One Hotels Fellow. So she is going to be discussing with Travis today about the hidden source of embodied carbon in hotels, which might surprise you. It's actually furniture and the other movable fixtures in a hotel room. So really exciting conversation that we're going to be having today. And to introduce myself, I'm Aileen. I'm with One Click LCA. I'm one of our communications specialists here. And I'm joined, as always, by Travis Dahl, who is an LCA and EPD expert. Travis, as always, great to have you here. And of course, we are also joined by our production team. They are behind the scenes, so you won't see their faces. But we have April and Nick today. They are going to be in the chat on LinkedIn and on Livestorm, interacting with you and collecting your questions. And speaking of collecting your questions, we always end these episodes with a live question and answer session. So go ahead if you have any questions now. If you think of any questions as Sana and Travis are talking, we want to hear those questions and get those answered. So go ahead and either put them in the comments if you're joining us on LinkedIn, or put them in the chat if you are joining us on Livestorm. And a little bit of housekeeping rules, what to expect from this episode. Like I said earlier, we're going to start by having the conversation with Sana on her research and what it has shown about embodied carbon in the hospitality industry. So really exciting conversation. After we've dove into her research and found out some of her insights, we're going to challenge Sana with a question of our own. And then we will jump to the live Q&A where we will have your questions. So go ahead, like I said before, and put those questions in the chat as you are thinking of them, and we'll be able to ask Sana those questions towards the back half of the episode. So just real quick, I'm seeing some people are tuning in. We've got some guests joining us from Finland, from the UK. We've got someone from Nigeria. We've got some folks from the US. So we're seeing people from all around the world. Welcome. So glad to have you here. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Travis to introduce our guest and get things going.
Thanks, Aileen. Welcome, everybody. This is the 10th episode of Carbon Experts Live. This is One Click LCA's series of lively discussions with the experts that are driving forward low-carbon construction. If you've missed any of our previous sessions, you can check them out on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@OneClickLCA. Our topic today is sustainable hotels, the hidden cost of carbon in furniture, and we're thrilled today to be joined by Sana Mahmood. Welcome, Sana. So Sana comes from a background of interior architecture and is currently sitting as the adjunct facility, sits in the adjunct facility for design at Columbia College in Chicago, as well as pursuing the furniture, fixtures, and equipment research with E2 One Hotels, which is environmental entrepreneurs. And we're pleased to have her on the show. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So something we always kick this off with is just a little bit of a personal story. We want to get to know who Sana is a little bit before we kind of delve into some of your research. How did you get started? How did you end up working in hospitality design and getting into sustainable design?
So I am a licensed interior designer by trade, and I specialize in hospitality interiors. I ended up in hospitality design by pure luck. In fact, right after college, I one of my very first job was with a small hospitality firm, and that particular career just took off. Just working with very firsthand opportunity, working with progressive owners, really interesting visionaries, and my career took off from the international space, doing hotels worldwide, and I was also domestically. And I got to be on the private practice where I was a designer for 12 years, and then I moved into the brand and real estate. So altogether, it's been a 20-year, history now, but now I've transitioned into the teaching side of things.
Cool. I just realized during the introduction, I'm probably saying this wrong, but what can you tell us about E2 One Hotels Fellowship, and what's the focus?
So E2 stands for Environmental Entrepreneur. So you can Google now, it's e2.org. And environmental entrepreneurs, they're basically the business arm of the NRDC, which is the National Resource Defense Council here in the United States. And it is a national organization. It's a nonpartisan group, which it's a group of business leader, investors, professionals like myself, who come from both the private sector and the public, and they advocate for sustainability. They advocate for smart policies that is good for the economy and for the environment. So that is what E2 does. Now, One Hotels is a luxury hotel brand that focuses on sustainability. It was founded in 2050 by Barry Sternlight. He is also the CEO of Starwood Capital Group. And One Hotels funds the fellows to carry on their project.
Got it. So
yeah.
with this project that you decided to tackle, how did you approach them with this?
So, question. So I felt there was a connection. This was back in 2022. And I felt a connection with both of these companies, E2 and One Hotels, just because of my career, what I had experienced. But at the time when I was writing this application, we were still in the midst of the pandemic. So there was still a lot of uncertainty in the hospitality space. There was all this movement taking place with these record-breaking these hotel transactions that were taking place, supply chain issues, construction cost issues, projects that were being put on hold, hotel companies downsizing. And there was just so much of this movement because the industry took a really big hit from the pandemic. There was no more travel. There was no more, heads in beds in the hotel room. So, and I started to really reflect on my career. And I didn't realize the level of climate urgency that we were in. I was just very naive. And so I started to do my own research, and I just became very curious on my own. For my own curiosity, I wanted to know the work that I do. I mean, as an interior architect, it's not just FF&E. FF&E is just a very small scope. But I was really curious to know what kind of embodied carbon is within furniture. And so, and the fellowship also requires you to keep the scope very small. So I couldn't do a building or all the materiality in a hotel. So I wanted to pick something that I could relate to when I spoke to a hotel owner. And so furniture is something you can really relate to. If I say, a side chair, you know what that is. If I say a headboard, you know what that is. So I wanted to make it very tangible, very meaningful, but the scope small enough that I could then approach it. So I just became very intrigued. Again, feeding my own curiosity, I wanted to know what this was. And just started to take more interest in this urgency that we were in. And I just happened to know E2 One Hotels for a while. I was following their fellows. I just was really impressed with the diversity of projects that were coming out. And I just gave it a chance, and I, put my heart out there, what I wanted to do. And I, was accepted as one of the 6 fellows in the United States.
Very cool. What issue did you decide to target with this project? What was the main issue that you wanted to address with this research?
So my main focus for this research was that I wanted to address the embodied carbon of existing hotel FF&E. So FF&E stands for furniture, fixture, and equipment. And I wanted to use this opportunity to increase awareness among hotel owners. So when they're planning for CapEx, and to consider circular principles to reduce the need of purchasing new items. So to give a little bit of a background, in hospitality, renovations typically take every 5 to 7 years. And hotels are required to set aside a certain percentage of their annual revenues as part of what they call the FF&E reserve. So bigger hotels, which are known as full service hotels, is something maybe you guys can relate to when you go on conventions. These are hotels that have very big ballrooms, hotel meeting rooms. They have a business center, a spa, a fitness center. They have various types of guest rooms, maybe suites, and then 3-meal restaurants. So their reserves are much larger than a business hotel where many of us can relate to, which is a small lobby. You have a breakfast that is served, and then you just have hotel rooms, and you have a fitness center and maybe 2 meeting rooms. And their reserves are a little bit different. So the renovations are mandated by the brand to ensure that there's a consistency and a standardization in the marketplace. And by doing so, by hotel owners doing this renovation, they maintain a very competitive edge in the market, guest satisfaction. And also when you maintain the building, the building age better, the products and the building systems have a longevity. So I really wanted to really address more of how can we reduce furniture in landfill and consider circular principles.
So when you said that they're required, you don't mean there's not a government policy or anything in place. This is mandated by the organization.
This is mandated by the brand. Yeah, the brand.
The brand.
Okay. Brands, yeah. So like a Hilton or a Marriott or a Choice or a Hyatt. So if you can think of those bigger names, hotel companies, it is mandated by them.
And you mentioned that a couple of the reasons why this is worthwhile doing this high frequency replacement, but when it comes to wear and tear and keeping the place relevant, but I guess what is the main approach for these organizations for having that replacement rate so high? Because I imagine a lot of these pieces of furniture are still functionally perfect or close to at the end of the, say, 5 or 7 years.
Hotels go through a lot of wear and tear. When you go into a guest room, it may seem like every day there's a guest in a guest room. How they treat and how they use the guest room is very different than you and I. So just think about when you take a suitcase into your guest room. You probably banged it into the front door and didn't even realize it. By the time you took it into the guest room, probably hit the bathroom door. And by the time you opened it, you probably hit the dresser and then you opened it. So there's all these, we do things so unconsciously, but hotels do go through a lot of wear and tear and damage that happens within a guest room. And the best way to keep it maintained is to just consistently, doing these repairs and making things look new, as new as possible, because every guest wants to have a room that looks like it was just built yesterday. Who doesn't want a very clean, perfect room? But when you see a chair where the seat is sagging, there's scratches on the desk, you already start having not the best customer experience or guest experience. So the goal is always for the guest to have the best experience. The room should always be clean. It should have less damages. So, with that, hotels have reviews that are based off on that. So it's important that these renovations take place because they do go through a lot of wear and tear that maybe coming from the space, I've seen the amount of damage that these rooms take. Now, you don't try to make everything bulletproof because we know it's going to go through a replacement, but to a certain point, there has to be a certain level of durability that we have to achieve.
I want to touch on something that you mentioned there in a few minutes, but first, what do we do with these interiors when like I think you mentioned earlier, or maybe it was in a previous conversation, that a lot of these hotels change hands or have been changing hands in the last few years. What are we doing with this stuff that maybe doesn't meet the brand requirements, and we're deciding to update these spaces?
So when a hotel is rebranded, or an old property just goes through, just a full refresh. So one of the most common practices would be, you auction off the FF&E, you have a clearance sale, or you do a liquidation. If that's not possible, you try to recycle as much as you can. But the issue with contract furniture is that there are so many layers of product and chemicals and code requirements that we have to meet. We have to disassemble those before we actually can recycle it. And there is really no manpower infrastructure for, especially like a city of Chicago, to do that. So these products then end up in landfill. The other things that many hotels do is they do give furniture to charity. Some of these also go to nonprofit entities, as well as even community projects. But when you think about hotel furniture, is just different size and weight compared to a residential furniture. This is contract, so it's very heavy. So if you think about taking even a headboard into your own home, it's going to be very, very large. It looks very proportional and and elegant in a guest room, but it may not be the same way when you actually take it to your own home. So contract furniture is just different. So in the end of the day, if it can't be recycled, there's only so much you can give to charity or community projects, whatnot, and in the end, it just does go to landfill.
So, with your research that you looked at a few different, or you looked at specific pieces of furniture, what's the overall process you took in doing this research?
Can you say that again? So looking at furniture?
You were looking at specific pieces of furniture. What was the overall process that you took in writing your paper and doing the research?
So the original intent was that I wanted to first find what the embodied carbon for the different pieces of a furniture that is in a guest room. So if you say a headboard, a nightstand, a lounge chair, a side table, a desk, a chair, a dresser. These are just, high level. I'm just naming some movable items that are in a guest room. So my first goal was to really find out, what is the embodied carbon of these pieces? And I didn't come across, in fact, anything. And so I started just doing a lot of research, reading articles and essays based on what other researchers had put out there. And one of the things that I learned was that the workplace industry and the healthcare industry, workplace and healthcare, were on the forefront of creating furniture EPDs. And I wasn't finding too much in the hospitality space at that time when I started my research. So, and when I came across some of the, the essays that I was reading, research paper that I was reading, there were two that were very empowering. One was in Norway, which is based on carbon footprint for contract furniture. And there was another one out of Turkey, which was based on residential furniture. Both of them claimed in their research that it is very difficult to find, there's a lack of data when it comes to furniture EPDs. And we need this information. We need to, create awareness around this. And we need this as also to be part of a building LCA. So, so when I realized that there was no information for me to work off of, I mean, at the same time as I was, doing this research, I was attending webinars very much like this, reaching out to the host, telling them I was interested in taking, seeing how they could help me with some of the information that I needed, going to trade shows, networking. And through those activities, I actually came across a manufacturer that I had worked with in the past, who was so intrigued about my project that they were willing to provide me with data, furniture data, actually data when it came to energy, to water, and materiality that I could then use to create and life cycle assessment. Now, I didn't even know that I had to create a model. That was another learning that I had to create. Well, you're going to have to create a model from scratch and then find out what the embodied carbon is. So then I went on a different hunt looking for the company who can help me. And then through my network, I came across One Click LCA, and there was 2 people that recommended it. So, and you guys just jumped on it, and the onboarding was, great, but there was a lot of struggle, and I struggle just as much. And from this, I realized we definitely need to advocate for more furniture EPDs.
What do you think was the biggest or what was the biggest hurdle in doing this research?
I would say number one biggest hurdle, and I could relate to the other researchers, the authors that I reached out to, that there's a lack of data, number one. Number two, I think that there isn't that much, I felt, just with the conversations that I was having, that there wasn't, with some of the manufacturers, the conversations that I had, there was no need to create an EPD. Number one, from their perspective, well, there is no demand from the owner. Well, the designers are not asking for it. The brand's not asking for it. So why should I go and create these EPDs? The second thing was there seems to be a lack of understanding, and I guess also there isn't that awareness that is there yet. Where if I was to create an EPD as a manufacturer, then my product does not get specified, because of maybe there's a high level of embodied carbon or carbon footprint. So I think that there needs to be an understanding that it doesn't matter how good or bad your product is. You're putting out these nutritional labels that are out there, and you let the consumer decide and make that informed decision for themselves. And so I just think that these are hurdles that we have to go through. I mean, it was definitely one for me. And I was very fortunate enough that this particular manufacturing company that I worked with, that were so progressive, and they said, we build hospitality furniture to last 30 years. But because of the cycles, we have to go through this, and maybe there's a different way that we can approach it. And I found that the best way to, just from my journey going through the LCA, onboarding process, that one of the best ways that you can start having these conversations is when you have this data, proven data that you can use, and just start these conversations.
So obviously a lot of work has been done in the LCA space to date, and we're still missing tons of, there's loads of gaps all over the place, specifically with furnishings, which is, I think, really driven you to doing this research. And I guess how do we get this message across to the larger organizations that have ESG policies, and they're pretty heavily committed to making progress in this space, but there's just I guess a knowledge gap for them of how impactful this is to them actually meeting those goals.
So I can't really speak to the larger organizations. I know that some of the conversations that I had with the brands, the bigger hotel companies, their focus is scope 3. And so for me, this is why I wanted to make my research so focused on the ownership, because I think hotel ownership can really benefit from this information. How can we empower those individuals who I believe are the thought leaders, because they're the ones who are taking on the biggest risk, right? They're the ones who go after the financing to build a hotel. We have hotels because of these hotel owners and these investors. How can we educate them? How can we empower them? Because they are the ones who have the relationship with the brands, with the contractors, with the architects, the designers, the procurement, the manufacturers, the entire ecosystem that we work within the hospitality space. How can we empower them to make requests for this type of information? Because if the ownership wants it, then the designer is going to seek for it. If the designer seeks for it, then they're going to ask the manufacturer to create it. So there's an impact that takes place. But I think if we can educate ownership, then the change can maybe slowly take place.
And how big of an impact do you think furnishings are on a building throughout its life cycle? I'm assuming we're constructing hotels to last the standard 50, maybe 60 years, and we're changing the furnishings every 5 to 7 years. How big of an impact on the overall footprint of the building do you think that's going to take?
You can't even run a hotel without furniture, right? It is a very big impact. I think anyone who's watching this webinar right now is touching some piece of furniture, right? Um, you know, it is
I'm going
such
to
an
start
important
sitting on the floor.
asset. You can be. I mean, it's such an important asset to hotels that, you know, there's a certain reserve that is set aside for it. You know, what I learned in a report that was based in 2021, it talked about that, you know, right now furniture is not even considered as part of a building LCA. Now, I have not done a building LCA. I hope to, you know, accomplish that in the near future. But my understanding is the reason furniture is not a part of that is because a lack of data. So if more and more, you know, data for furniture would come out, these EPDs, then it could be part of it. So if we were to actually do an LCA of a building, of a hotel, and then the furniture, I think we can start seeing what really the impact is. And what a significant part, you know, FF&E is part of the building. Even if you take workplace design or even healthcare, like healthcare and hotels, they're very similar, right? They're rooms with a lot of furnishings, with a lot of built-ins. So I'm really curious to see what that would look like.
Can you talk a little bit about how you felt entering the LCA space, coming from your background and just what it was like getting into all of this?
Um, so, you know, when I learned that I had to create this, I really didn't even know what I was getting myself into. So, number one, I found your onboarding process to be so impactful. I don't think that I would have, you know, figured out what I needed to figure out at the time, you know, at the speed that I did. The When I first started learning about it, my head was spinning. It was too complex for me. But just like with anything that you learn, there's a learning curve, right? And then slowly and slowly, the more time you spend into it, it starts to get a little bit easier and easier. You know, so for me, you know, the hand holding that you know, that one click provided, it was monumental to what I accomplished. I don't think I would have accomplished this far without it. And for me, going through, I was so hungry to get to that number, that final embodied carbon number, that I felt like I was rushing through the process. Like you know, I wanted to go to the next thing, the next phase, the next life cycle stage, instead of just really making sure that every, you know, phase was like 100% accurate. I think that collecting the data was challenging at first, but you have to read a lot of data cards and really understand that you're picking the right data for the product that you're actually specifying. It's all very critical that you do it with a lot of high level of accuracy, and the system is also I felt the software was also very sensitive. So I mean, I really enjoyed, you know, learning about it. I think I just, you know, when I reflect on it, I have a new skill that I really enjoy and I want to continue, you know, and I don't think that would have come through without your onboarding process. And I just find the LCA to be so powerful in so many ways, and such, you know, data driven information that you can use to just, you know, start having really informative conversations. So I would say at first it was challenging. Um, I'm not perfect at it. You know, I still have opportunities, right? Just, you know, you're always learning from this. I think this is I consider myself a student for life. So learning something is a joy for me, and constantly asking questions and taking my knowledge to the next level. I think you guys have a, you know, phenomenal team that is so knowledgeable in this space. So I feel definitely at this point, I feel a lot more confident. You know, I'm ready to do a nightstand, a lounge chair, everything else that I need to do. Um, and in and the whole process, especially on the materiality side, you know, as a designer, I've done very detailed FF&E specification. I thought I had you know, feel that I have a very good knowledge on the product that I specify, especially on the customization side. But the LCA experience just took it to another level. When I started to dig into the materiality, I had to understand the chemicals that were involved in it. I never had to get that far, right? So now I'm putting on a hat on of a manufacturer, trying to really understand those components. So wearing different hats, I just think I'm a better designer than I was before, just of the awareness that the whole software was able to offer.
something that I've spoken with Nick a number of times, and I think I've spoken with you as well. And Nick being in the background on this call on the support side. The value of doing an LCA on a product, it's typically approached with the intent of getting the EPD, but now that you've run this assessment and are able to look at the product and maybe find better ways to make this stuff, how would you suggest approaching manufacture of new products to make them more sustainable?
Well, one of the things that I came across and the aha moment that I had, after I was done with this, looking at the different life cycles was, my gosh, raw materials, there's an intensive amount of energy that is used to create these products, not only on the raw material side, but also to manufacture a headboard, just one headboard. And those were like the two major hotspots that I saw in my LCA, in my assessment. And, when I think about my experience, I visited so many furniture factories, for my work and doing prototypes. And I remember, I can close my eyes and remember the different factories that I've been to, different Southeast Asia, and machines consistently running in the background. For every component, there's a machine that's doing something to creating a part that's going to go onto a piece of furniture. And, the amount of energy consumption to create the raw material and the energy consumption that is to create just the product itself, I think that manufacturers, number one, they would be, right away, I realized that we need to transition into renewable energy. That was very clear. That would, heavily reduce the amount of, the embodied carbon. But if a manufacturer doesn't do it, then how do you even know what part of the life cycle is a hotspot? Maybe it's the packaging, maybe it's the installation. I mean, I don't know. But I don't know how you can even have an awareness if you don't create it. And I just found it to be a very, very powerful tool, like I said, for ownership, for designers. But for manufacturers, I think it starts the innovation cycle and the design thinking of how can we be more innovative in creating something that reduces less waste or creates less or uses less energy.
You almost answered my last question here that I want to send you here, which is I guess I want to put together sort of a timeline. What did you, since this is the first conversation that we're having in the year on Carbon Experts Live, what's the coolest thing you saw over the last year, or what are you excited about coming in the next year or in the next 10 years? What's got you most excited?
Well, I saw this in 2023, and I think the conversation will continue in 2024. I think that there is definitely a shift in thinking. I think that there is a higher awareness, and more companies. Some companies are more progressive than others, but I just see there's a lot more just from the construction engineering. Side of things and the architecture and design space, the A&D space. I think there's a lot of white papers, research tools, toolkits, guides that is all going out to developers, to building owners, to educate them on what is taking place in the industry when it comes to climate urgency. So for me, I think that is progressing for 2024. For the next 10 years and moving forward, I think definitely there's going to be more LCA user. Hopefully, I see that. I'm going to be one of those LCA users. I believe that there is also going to be, there's going to be a birth to a new kind of aesthetic, just because of the awareness that we're learning from the LCA, just the whole life cycle of things. Maybe it's aesthetic that we didn't appreciate before, but because of the level of urgency that we are in today, perhaps that aesthetic is going to be more accommodating now. I also believe that moving forward, data-driven design is going to become more of a standard. More evidence-based design is going to be more of a standard, and I just can't wait to see what that looks like, because the LCA process really showed me that I want a design that is more, data-driven. And I definitely believe that there's going to be more furniture EPDs, but we have to somehow approach manufacturers, whether with incentives or grants or something that would really help them, because it is a heavier cost for them because they have so much product, right? So what can we do, just as the hospitality community, to really help them, even maybe manpower or having talent within their company who can do something like this, maybe is difficult to achieve. So what can we do to really help them? But I do believe moving forward, there's going to be more and more data on the furniture side so that we could create a building LCA that is furniture is a part of it.
That's great to hear. I feel the same way, and it's really been an interesting space as you know. It's like we're trying. We've got a good quality process to come up with good quality data, but in a lot of circumstances we just have a lot of knowledge gaps, and the work that's being done to really fill in those gaps is it's pretty spectacular of what's been done to date, and obviously the more we progress with this, the more accurate we're going to be able to get, and the better decisions we're going to be able to make as we really fill in these gaps.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Travis just said. It's been really interesting listening to this conversation, seeing what the future of measuring embodied carbon is going to look like. It's one of those things we're always trying to measure more and seeing the real carbon footprint, the real full picture. And this is likely going to be the next step. So gathering that data, like you say, it will come, but it's definitely important for us to look at now. I'd love to let you guys continue with the conversation because it's been super fascinating, but we have a really engaged audience. We've got a lot of questions coming from our audience. So we do want to move to the live Q&A soon, but first, we want to pose our question to you. Now, we ask all of our guests this question. If you had the power to change any one thing in the industry, what would it be?
I think that's a very difficult question, but for right now, at this moment, for what I'm feeling at this, at this very moment, would be, if I had the power to change, it would be to reduce furniture waste.
Excellent. Well, you know what? It's a broad question, so great. It's a great answer, and like you say, the furniture has a larger impact than I think a lot of people realize. So I think that will definitely be sort of the next step in what we're looking at. Now, before we get to the live Q&A, we do have a question for our live audience. You guys have been so engaged. Love your questions. Really excited to ask them shortly. But before we do, if you are joining us on Livestorm, we're going to pop up a poll on that you'll be able to answer. And that is, would you like to schedule a free consultation to discuss how you can use a life cycle assessment to measure the embodied carbon of your project? So we've been talking about furniture, but of course, measuring embodied carbon, there's a lot of different things that we can measure, doing whole building life cycle assessment or product life cycle assessment if you are in the manufacturing business. So go ahead, and if you see that poll pop up, you can go ahead and answer it. If you are joining us on LinkedIn, you won't see a poll, but you can always head to our website and just book a demo with us directly if you would like to take advantage of that free consultation. That's oneclicklca.com. And now I'm going to remove this slide so we can go to our questions from our live audience. So the first question is, are there 2 or 3 key resources that you could share from your research, asking as an LCA practitioner trying to quantify FF&E embodied carbon? So if you could, give some of those resources. This was a great question, and a lot of our audience sort of thumbs up this question. So a lot of people want to hear about this.
So 2 to 3 resources that I could share. I would say the first one would be to speak with the manufacturer. If you haven't considered a manufacturer, I think starting a conversation with the manufacturer to get their energy and water data would actually really help you create a more accurate embodied carbon for your FF&E. I was very fortunate that the company that I worked with actually owned the factory. So there are companies out there that that may have a confidential agreement with the factory, but they don't own it. But you won't know until you ask. So I think one of the key resources would be to, having a manufacturer be part of this would be critical, because you also want to know how they would package the product that you design, or that the FF&E that you design. How would they package that? What does that packaging look like? So to understand the energy, the water, and the packaging side of things, I think those are two resources that you could, and then how they would also install it. So that would be the third resource. I think that going back to your manufacturer would be critical in this.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. I'm sure everyone's gonna, that's keeping that conversation going between you and the manufacturers you work with. That's what we see a lot too on the more construction side of things. We still, need more EPD data. And so that's always going back to those manufacturers. So have you seen examples of how leveraging low embodied carbon refurnished, remanufactured furniture as a marketing strategy for sustainable travel habits? Could this combat the perceived desire for all new furniture in rooms? So are you seeing that change that you talked about would likely be coming? Are you seeing the first hints of that? Or maybe how can we lean into that as a marketing ploy? How can we start getting people to think about this?
I think from a marketing strategy, I think it's the way I saw it from a marketing strategy is that, yes, I think lower income embodied carbon as, refurnishing, reusing, repurposing, or any of the configurations, I think are big into the furniture space. So what I learned, even being on the brand side of things, we learned that, guests really want to know the local story of a hotel. So if we were to use it as a marketing strategy, that the headboard that you have used, we remove the foam that is made out of polyurethane, and we replaced it with coconut fiber, which helps reduce, significantly reduce the carbon emission. That's a very interesting story that or that we have it refurbished by a local company, or that we're using locally sourced materials. That I think it all adds to a very interesting storytelling that the guests want to engage with, and it's very special to that property. How you do it, I think that is, the designers and the owners, and it's a collaborative effort. But definitely, I think that this is what I'm talking about, using circular design as part of the CapEx planning, instead of considering new furniture. And if we are considering new furniture, how can we consider new pieces of furniture as we, as a design for disassembly? And maybe if it's disassembled, what else can it be used for? So it's not going to the landfill; it's going for a different need.
This could be something that we create new demand for new workers as well. Is disassembly engineers. Like how do we design this stuff so that it actually can be easily broken down and repurposed into the next product? Like you said earlier, if we're making stuff that's designed to last for 30 years, but we're chopping it off at the knees 5 years into that, we should be able to just update these pieces and continue using them throughout that life cycle.
Absolutely. Same with the headboard. One of the things that I realized, that the weight of the headboard, because of the amount of MDF that's in there, that's the largest weight. So how can we not replace that, right? Because that's going to create the most waste into the landfill. So if we were able to keep the structure of the headboard and maybe replace the foam or replace the upholstery, because upholstery will go through more damage, how can we, select an upholstery that is a lot more sustainable? Or how can we refinish the headboard without, having it being shipped to Asia and remanufactured? So I think there's circular design offers so many ways of, one of the resources that I used was the global circular design glossary that was created by the Sustainable Furniture Council and Mabel Furniture. I found that as a very, very helpful resource, maybe something that you can even leverage into while you're thinking about, low embodied carbon furniture.
So just another thought on that, Sana. Since you talked about sending this stuff back to Asia, let's say for remanufacturing, and a lot of this stuff does come from Asia. We hear a lot about how heavy the emissions are from India or China. China is surprisingly doing a huge amount of work to decarbonize their energy grid, and they're moving really quickly. But with the work that you had done, how big of an impact, or I should say, where were these products coming from? Was it Asia? Was it onshored in the U.S.? And how do you feel that the different region of manufacture would impact the footprint of the product?
So, majority of hospitality furniture is manufactured in Asia. China is a major hub for it. Because of the supply chain issues during the pandemic, the manufacturing didn't stop; it just slowed down. And my understanding was that for an example, the manufacturer that I was working with, they also had a factory in Vietnam. So a lot of the manufacturing started to take place in Vietnam and then shipped over to a major port in the United States. And when it gets shipped to the major port in the United States, it's either goes directly to the project sites by truck. So you can just see you're going from sea, a very long distance, going to a major port, and then from there to on a truck, and then to the warehouse or a project site. So just looking at that, United States is just not known as a furniture manufacturing hub. It's more for residential, perhaps, but not really for hospitality. I think there's a great opportunity to, especially on the refurbishment side, to have companies, instead of sending the product all the way to Asia, perhaps maybe we can send it somewhere locally in the United States that can do the refurbishment and take it back to the hotel.
I love where, there are some facts about where things come from, and sometimes we're shipping things long distance. Obviously, from a sustainability standpoint, everyone prefers things to be local to that area. But I love your point about telling the story of, there's all these ways that we can make furniture more circular, but, and this is kind of touching on what you first said, but using that story in the marketing and telling that story. Sometimes I think we forget that people want to hear what we're doing instead of just saying, oh yeah, we're a green company, or we're meeting these requirements that we set internally. Tell that story to your customers, because people want to be part of something bigger. They want to stay in a hotel that they feel is doing good for the planet. Mm-hmm. So this next question, you kind of touched on it a little bit during the conversation, and Travis, you might have some insight into this as well. But, asking about what current benchmark data is there for EPD zone furniture and loose FFE, and when will this data gap improve? So I know you talked about that there's not maybe as much data, you had to use some generic data, but when, and I'll add, how can we make this data gap improve?
Travis, I'll let you start. Because sure. If you want, go ahead. You can start.
Really just a quick thought. I don't have any thoughts on when manufacturers are going to start filling in their own product specific data. That's really just it comes. We need to have the demand in the market, either from the market or the requirements in policy. And of course, we do have forward-thinking manufacturers that are filling in some of these gaps, and some of it is out there. But I think coming back to what Aileen just mentioned, and Sana, you might be moving on to as well, is just leaning on generic data. Really, that's like in OneClick's database. That's something that we have a ton of it available. where we've basically done some of this type of research to figure out how much of what materials are going into a specific product and how much energy typically goes into making that thing, and then localizing the energy, that energy input based on where that product is likely to be made. And it's a reasonably good estimate, but again, it's really just an estimate. What we really need is that hard data from the manufacturers that's third party verified and is specific to their process and their products.
And I don't know if you have any other things to add, or maybe some insights into what you think we can do to push manufacturers to close the data gap.
I agree definitely with what Trevor said. There is a gap. I mean, I mentioned it several times, in this webinar, and the way we're going to improve it is by incentives and by encouraging manufacturers, giving them some type of funding that would support them to do this type of LCAs. But I don't know what that, I think that the best accuracy that you can have at the moment, if you don't have that, what I loved about the one-click process was that there was so much generic data available. If I didn't know, if I wasn't able to find the exact information from the manufacturer, I was so fortunate that the manufacturer gave me so much of their data that I didn't have to think too much of, the what ifs or the worst case scenario, or, go after generics. There were some things that were like that, but not too much. So definitely, I believe that empowering manufacturers to create this information, and I think that we can then lead to more of a benchmark data moving forward.
Something else that I think is really important, and we'll be having a conversation about this in February on Carbon Experts Live, is carbon markets as well. So determining what the baseline of a specific type of building is, and being able to create carbon credits from those baselines, and create another financial incentive. I think that's going to be something that really pushes us forward fairly quickly.
Yeah, that's all good news. Another question that we have from our audience is, they found it quite informative, and they too have struggled to find EPDs and optimization data for furniture and other critical building materials. Do we get a GBCI/LEED general or BD&C specific 1 hour for a CMP requirement? So, and maybe in your answer, I don't know, Travis, if you want to talk about this, but if you could explain just for any of our audience that maybe doesn't know what all of those acronyms are.
I think there's two pieces here, if I'm understanding it right. So I guess struggling to find the EPDs. The EPD is the third-party verified proof of the product's LCA. So it's really just the results of the LCA. It's a snapshot in time. The LCA is we like to think about it, or we kind of, Nick and Sana and I talk about it internally as more of a process, and you're able to iterate through that process. But the EPD is kind of a snapshot in time of that LCA with third-party verified results. Optimizing data. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what they're asking there. And if people are looking for their certification credits through this webinar, if I'm understanding that right, no, that's not something that's going to come through this webinar.
Yeah, and maybe for the person who posed this question, we can maybe take this conversation offline and answer your questions. So we've got the we know who's asked the question, so maybe we can take this offline. We do have one more question from our audience, though. The last question that we'll have today, which is, do you think perhaps promoting the concept of building materials as services can increase the motivation to reduce embodied carbon for FF&E, when manufacturers being a part of the waste and demolition help in the overall life cycle? So a really interesting question, Sana.
I've seen conversations and some things that I've read that I think that and I just don't know how it works and how it will work in a hotel. I think it's an idea that should definitely be you can pilot. I think if what if manufacturers were to rent furniture to hotels? What if there were take back schemes? I know a lot of manufacturers, especially smaller companies, have take back schemes. I think that would definitely help reduce a lot of the waste when it comes to furniture. Um, so those were the two things that I saw that, how does the dynamic change? What does the reserves look like? But if you rent it, and after the 7 years, the manufacturer take it back, and then um, you know the manufacturers being overseas and so powerful overseas, I really don't know how that really works. But I do believe that take back schemes, or instead of going to landfill and then going back to the manufacturing, maybe those material is reused. I think is all very interesting that could be discussed. I just don't know. Those are the type of conversations that I want to have with the manufacturer that I worked with, and understand the complexity behind it. Because, and when we say things like this, maybe seem very easy, but actually doing it and cleaning a material and repurposing it and building something new, perhaps there's a different challenge to it that we are not aware of at this moment.
Yeah, I love that sort of uh, future focused answer. Maybe it doesn't, maybe it's not feasible right now, like you say, because so many manufacturers are overseas from the hotels that they are producing the furniture for. But what could that look like? And could that be the way that we're headed? Uh, Again, a really interesting take, and looking ahead, looking to the future of what this industry
Mm.
will look like. Well, that is all the time. We had such great conversation today. Great questions from our audience. Thank you guys so much. Before we wrap it up with Sana, I just want to let you guys know we do have a lot of resources that you can use. We've got embodied carbon policy resources at our oneclicklca.com/library website. So a lot of information, global information. So no matter what region you're from, you'll probably find good information here on our website. And we've also got free training resources at our academy.oneclicklca.com. Our next boot camp, it's an LCA boot camp, is coming up at the end of this month. So if you're interested, sign up. It is free training. We also have some EPD boot camps coming up a little bit later in the year, and we have a ton of on-demand courses. So check out the Academy. It's a great resource for you to learn more about this industry and become an expert. And keep the conversation going. If you have more questions for Sana or Travis, if you want to, if your question wasn't asked live because we didn't have time, you can take a screenshot now. We've got some contact information. Both Sana and Travis are on LinkedIn, so you can reach out to them there and find out more about what they're working on. And then our next episode is actually going to be next week, and it's going to be with One Click LCA's founder and CEO, Panu Pasanen. And he's going to be talking about the construction LCA and embodied carbon outlook for 2024, and also discussing the results of our carbon outlook survey that we surveyed globally the industry last year and got some good feedback. So they'll be discussing that, and then what to expect for the coming year. So definitely do mark that in your calendars. And before we let you go, I'm going to hand it back to Travis for any sort of last wrap up comments.
Yeah, just two quick comments. First, if you're joining us from anywhere and there's somebody that you would like for us to interview, you'd like us to showcase and learn from, definitely please reach out and let us know. You can email us at the contacts noted above, or at hello@oneclicklca.com. And then last thing, I want to hand it back over to you, Sana. Do you have any final thoughts or comments that you want to leave with all of our viewers?
I wanted to thank everyone for coming to this webinar. Happy New Year to everyone, and a big thank you to One Click for really giving me the opportunity and the space to speak about my challenge. And for those who are listening, if you feel that there is something that you really wanted to research, or an idea that you wanted to embark on, I would really encourage you, regardless of the challenge. I put this on myself, and I'm so glad that I did it, because I'm just a wiser, more conscious designer because of this fellowship that I took on. So I wish you everyone all the best, and I look forward to, again, continuing the conversation, and how we can just support each other moving forward, because it's this conscious effort that's really going to make the improvement.
Fantastic. Well, once again, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Sana, for your insights. This has been an incredible conversation, and we will see you, our live audience, next week.